I am Emily Thompson, 28 years old, and the moment my father threw my old suitcase and my beloved paintbrush onto the sodden lawn, I knew my life had been pushed down a path of no return, a strange path I had never imagined. The rain that night was like a silent, cruel knife cutting deep into my heart, cold and sharp to the point of being terrifying. The sound of rain pattering on the tin roof, the thunder rumbling from the distant horizon, mixed with the choked sobs rolling in my chest, weaving a weary symphony of isolation and despair. I huddled in the old car, parked in front of the house that had once been my home, now a cage of shattered memories. The yellow light of the streetlights pierced the thick rain, illuminating the lawn where my luggage lay scattered, like the lost pieces of a life that had just been discarded. The sound of arguing still echoed from behind the closed door, and my father's every word was like a hammer that pounded straight into my heart. "Get out! You're not my son anymore!" My father, John Thompson, said with a voice filled with anger and resentment. He, the tall, hard-faced man who had been the rock of our family, was now the one who had cruelly cut me out of his life. The lights in the house were bright, and Victoria, his lover, stepped to the door, arms folded, looking at me with cold, smug eyes. Her smirk was like another knife, stabbing deeper into the wound that had not yet healed in my heart. "There's no room now, is there, dear John?" Her voice rang out clearly enough for me to hear, a declaration of final victory. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, swallowing back sobs. This old car, now my last refuge in the pouring rain, marked an unforeseen demise in my life. The smell of old leather and the old humidity in the car only amplified the chilling loneliness. I closed my eyes, trying to push away the cruel image that had just occurred, but memories of my mother, of this house, of a family once filled with love, surged like a flood. My mother, Sarah, the woman with the gentle smile, used to sit beside me in the sunlit living room, gently stroking my hair as I immersed myself in the world of painting. "My daughter has a talent, just paint what you love." Her voice was warm like a protective embrace. My father, still a kind, loving man, smiled and added, "Sarah is right. As long as you are happy, Emily." And my brother David, a few years older than me, would sit hunched over reading in the corner of the room, occasionally looking up at me, smiling affectionately. We were a modest middle-class family in suburban New York, where cozy dinners and nights of storytelling and laughter were a given. I had naively believed that life would always be this peaceful, a picture of happiness and peace. My mother had said, "Home is the safest place to be, the place to return to after every storm." But now that peace had shattered like glass falling on stone, shattered, cold, beyond repair. The sobs from my throat mingled with the rain, becoming distorted sounds lost in the cold air. I wondered, was there a place in the world for someone who had just been abandoned by his own family? The question hung in the air like a heavy black cloud, signaling the bleak and lonely future that awaited me. The rain that night lingered in my mind, like a needle stuck in my memory. But no one knew. It was just the culmination of a long-standing tragedy. My childhood, the peaceful years in New York, had been a colorful picture, filled with love. My family was middle class at that time, not rich, but warm enough. My father, John, was a passionate civil engineer. My mother, Sarah, was a gentle elementary school teacher. My brother, David, 2 years older than me, was a smart, quiet boy who spent all day burying himself in the world of books. I still remember those sunny Sunday afternoons. The whole family gathered in the living room, where golden light poured through the large windows. My mother sat beside me, patiently guiding my every immature drawing. She had a talent for turning my naive ideas into vivid shapes on paper. "My daughter is really talented. Just draw what you love," she whispered, her voice warm as a summer hug. My father, although he knew nothing about art, was always supportive. "Sarah is right. As long as you are happy, Emily." He smiled, his eyes sparkling with pride. And David, always quietly in the corner of the room, sometimes looked up, smiling faintly when he saw me and my mother. Those were moments of heartbreaking peace. I used to believe that life would always be a gentle stream like that, but that stream was cruelly stopped. One fateful day, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. That terrible disease quickly took away her smile and gentle eyes in less than a year. I still cannot forget the last evening in the hospital. My mother lay there, her face pale, but still trying to hold my father in my hands. I love you. Let's always be together. Her voice was weak, but her eyes were still full of affection. And then she left, leaving a huge void that nothing could fill, both in the house and in each of our hearts. My mother's death turned everything upside down, especially my father. He had gone from being a warm and caring man to being cold, harsh, and distant. The loss had caused him to erect an iron wall between himself and everyone else. He threw himself into his work, using discipline and material success as the only measure of his worth. The laughter that once echoed in the house died down, replaced by stifling silence and stern orders. Emily, you need to focus on your studies. Art is just a hobby, not a career, he said, his voice flat and cold. I protested timidly. But Dad, I love to draw. He interrupted immediately, his eyes misty. Don't argue with me. You need a steady job like David. My brother David took the safer path. He studied business, as his father had hoped. After my mother's death, he became even more silent and withdrawn. I would reach out to him, hoping for a look of understanding, a small word of comfort, but he would only remain silent or nod in agreement with my father. In my own home, I felt alone, like a caged bird, eager to soar in the artistic sky but held down by the invisible bonds of expectation and fear. My father believed that only discipline and tangible success could save us from the pain of loss again. For him, art was a vague luxury that offered no guarantee of a future. And I gradually realized that the gap between me and the rest of my family was growing. My father and David chose the practical, safe path, while I longed for a world of inspiration and color. But deep down, I still tried to fit in, tried to please my father, just to hold on to the last fragile bond that connected us. The conflict between passion and expectation grew more and more insidious, like a potential fire in the cold ashes. I could not have imagined that the fire would flare up, burn everything down, leaving me alone in the ashes of the past. Despite my father's constant disapproval and my brother's indifference, the artistic flame within me still burned quietly, small but resilient in the darkness of doubt. I decided to study art history at a university in New York. It was a bold choice, almost a silent declaration against the prejudices and expectations my father had always imposed. New York, with its dazzling galleries, ancient museums, and galleries hidden in humble alleys, became my own world, a space where I found peace and purpose. I vividly remember the long days in the university library, where I immersed myself in voluminous volumes about great painters and art schools of every era. Each painting, each sculpture had a vivid story, and I longed to be the one to tell those stories. My eyes lit up every time I read about Van Gogh's Wounded Journey, Picasso's Genius Rebellion, or the quiet elegance of Vermeer's works. For me, art was more than images or colors. It was a universe of emotions, a living history, and a deep layer of philosophy. College is where I found myself, I used to think. Every work of art is a soul waiting to be told. To gain experience and make ends meet in the expensive city, I interned at a local art museum. I started with the smallest tasks: dusting statues, organizing notes, even guiding visitors. I was fascinated by everything, even touching ancient works or breathing in the art-filled air. Later, I found a part-time job at a small gallery in Soho. The gallery was modest, but filled with natural light and filled with bold works by young artists. I loved the bustling, inspiring atmosphere and the feeling of being a bridge bringing art closer to the hearts of the public. There are nights when I stay alone after work, meticulously arranging paintings for an upcoming exhibition. I carefully move each frame, adjust the lighting, and look at the space as a whole. Every time I see the perfectly arranged works, I smile, a simple yet profound joy, as if I too are being understood and acknowledged. But that joy was never complete. A dark cloud called pressure from my father always hung over my head. My father never stopped criticizing my career. Every phone call from him ended with harsh, heavy, and indifferent questions. Emily, How long are you going to do that precarious job? The rent in New York is so expensive. How do you plan to manage? Come home. His harsh voice on the phone was like a slap that forced me to wake up from my dream. I tried to explain, talk about my passion, about the opportunity to develop, but he never listened. He calls it childish, a waste of youth, I told myself. The more I struggled, the more I was pulled back into the cold reality he had created. The pressure from my father not only weighed on my career path, but also penetrated my personal life. I had a college relationship with Daniel, a smart, practical guy. He loved me and appreciated my passion, but he couldn't hide his worries about an uncertain future. One evening, we sat in a small cafe, the yellow light falling on his face, a tired, troubled face. Emily, I know you love art, but life isn't always like a painting. Your father was right. We need a stable job. I can't live in this precarious situation forever. I held his hand, trying to hold on to something that was slipping away. But I can't give up on my passion. Daniel shook his head slightly, his eyes filled with regret. I'm sorry, I think we should stop. I watched him turn away, feeling the world around me collapse. I tried my best to keep that relationship, but pressure from my father and the distance in our thoughts made it impossible for us to move forward. It was like a vicious cycle. I was thriving in the work I loved, but the stress of home was pushing me into isolation. The disparity between the joy of my art and the pressures of reality was tearing me apart from the inside. I knew it. A bigger confrontation was coming, and I still didn't know if I would stand firm or be swept away in the whirlwind of expectations and resistance. My life, already hanging by a thread in the storm, became even more stifling when Victoria walked in. I still remember that fateful evening. My father, John, his face lit up with an inexplicable joy, introducing her at dinner. Victoria, in her mid-40s, was dressed in expensive clothes, carrying the confident demeanor of someone accustomed to being listened to. She claimed to be a successful financial expert, and at that moment a chill ran down my spine. Emily, this is Victoria. She's great with finances. She'll help us manage things better. Dad's voice was filled with excitement as if he'd just found the key to his life. I forced a smile, replying politely. Nice to meet you, Emily. I hear you're an artist? Interesting. Her voice was honeyed, but her eyes were cold, calculating. I felt like I was facing an underground storm, calm on the surface, but ready to swallow everything. Just a few weeks later, Victoria moved in. She brought with her a host of flashy furniture and stylish statues, and quickly set about renovating the house. Familiar corners, my mother's mementos, were removed, hidden, or disappeared without explanation. The gentle scent of my mother's candles, the smell of old books in the study, all were replaced by the strong scent of perfume and the cold smell of new paint from unfamiliar furniture. Once, I caught her ordering the maid to move the old armchair, the one my mother used to sit in on winter afternoons knitting. My heart sank. What are you doing? I asked, my voice trembling. Victoria turned around, her eyes sharp as knives. When her father was not there, her gentle mask fell away. Emily, you should understand. Don't interfere in things you don't understand. I won't let anyone break up the relationship between John and I. Her voice was low but carried a cold authority. This is your home. I tried to keep my cool. Victoria chuckled, her voice sarcastic. It's John and I's home. And you are just a longtime guest who hasn't left. Each word was like a needle, piercing my heart, reminding me that I was now the only one left in my own home. Victoria didn't just remake the house, she also remade my father. He became strangely dependent on her, as if every decision now had to be made through Victoria's advice. She skillfully created the image of a devoted companion while gradually separating him from me, turning me into a shadow. I remember the suffocating dinners. Victoria would often make disparaging remarks about my life in front of my father. John, look at Emily. She's always chasing after the unknown. She needs a more practical job. Her voice was sweet but venomous. My father would nod, his eyes turning sternly to me. Victoria is right. You should reconsider your path. Those eyes, no longer the ones my father knew. I felt doubted, rejected, and most of all, betrayed by the person closest to me. I used to tell myself that my father had every right to start anew after his loss. I tried to get to know Victoria, to smile, to talk, to find some kind of common ground, because I believed that if my father was happy, I could learn to be happy too. But my doubts grew. When we were alone, she was as cold as stone. She always tried to stifle my voice, to make me an unnecessary piece of luggage in my father's eyes. Gradually, Victoria took over every space, not only the physical, but also the mental. She erased every trace of my mother, replacing it with something lifeless and empty. Every day that passed, I felt like I was living in a sophisticated invasion, where I was the last keeper of the fire in the house that used to be my home. The atmosphere in the house became heavy. My every step carried a simmering fear. The house was no longer a shelter, but a silent battlefield where I faced a cold and ruthless enemy alone. I knew that the great confrontation was coming, and this time no one would be on my side. Living under the same roof with Victoria was like playing a life-or-death game of chess, where I was always the one being cornered. Every action and every word of mine was scrutinized, twisted, and turned into a weapon to manipulate my father. In the midst of that suffocating maze, a fragile ray of light suddenly flashed, then was quickly swallowed by darkness. It was a small inheritance from my late grandmother. One morning, I received a letter from my lawyer's office. It was a notice. I had inherited $8,000 from my grandmother. I missed her terribly, the only person who had never doubted or ridiculed my passion for art. The amount was not much, but it had deep spiritual value. It was mine, a small fulcrum for hope, for starting over, for leaving this suffocating cage. It's not much, but it's mine, I told myself, embracing the dream of rebirth like a weak ray of sunshine on a gloomy day. But that light didn't have time to warm my heart before Victoria caught my scent. She had a terrifying instinct when it came to money. During a stuffy dinner, amid the clanging of knives and forks and the heavy silence, she suddenly spoke, her eyes sweeping past me like a sharp knife. "John, dear, this house needs a lot of work, and Emily is all grown up now. Do you have any savings, Emily? Can you share some of the burden with your father?" I was stunned, my hands shaking so much that I almost dropped the plate. The brazenness in her voice slapped me in the face. My only consolation, my private money, was being openly extorted by her in front of my father. As usual, my father did not notice anything wrong. He just nodded silently, and I understood. I had no choice but to nod along. But that was only the first shot. Victoria wanted more than money. She wanted everything. One evening, I returned to my room to find my things in disarray. A feeling of unease settled in. I quickly searched my mother's old box, the place where my memories were kept. The pearl necklace, the silver daisy earrings, the ring with my mother's name, these were all I had left of her. My heart pounded as I realized some of them were missing. "It can't be," I said, my throat choking. At that moment, Victoria appeared in the doorway, a ghost. Around her neck, a pearl necklace, my mother's treasure, glittered in the light. Her eyes were cold, her smile triumphant. "Oh, you're looking for this? John gave it to me. He said there's no point in keeping old things." I felt the blood boil in my veins. "That's my mother's. How could you—" I spat out each word, shaking with rage. My father, hearing me, called from the living room. "What's the matter, Emily? Why are you so loud?" Victoria shot me a sharp look, signaling silence. I bit my lip, swallowing my anger. How could I explain when my father was completely in her clutches? She didn't just want the property. She wanted to erase every trace of my mother, to take away my memories and my love for her. Desperate, I turned to the only person I trusted, my brother, David. I called him that night, my voice shaking. "David, I need you. Victoria is doing strange things. She took my mother's things." On the other end of the line, David sighed. His voice sounded tired and numb over the phone. "Emily, don't make a big deal out of it. Victoria is Dad's partner. He's happy, don't make things worse." But I tried to say, but he cut me off. You take care of yourself. I'm busy. Then the line went dead. The sound of beep, beep echoed coldly in the empty room. I sat there motionless, my hand clutching the phone. The brother I had once admired, the last support I had ever seen, had turned his back. My doubts about Victoria had now turned into open conflict. But I remained silent, because I didn't want to hurt my father. I told myself, don't hurt him. I'll handle it myself. But the more I remained silent, the more I felt like I was falling apart. Going up against Victoria, a scheming and cold person, alone was almost impossible. I was cornered with no way out. After David refused to help, a dense loneliness surrounded me like a fog that would not dissipate. The house, which had once been my home, had now become an invisible battlefield where every step, every breath I took could fall into Victoria's calculating trap. I avoided her as much as possible, staying in the gallery late into the night, immersing myself in colors and lines, hoping that creativity could mask the unease that was quietly gnawing at me. It was then that a seemingly innocuous detail that I had ignored suddenly became an important link in the chain of suspicion. I remembered a letter from a Miami law firm addressed to my father, John Thompson. It had landed on his desk a few weeks earlier. At the time, I had paid it no attention, dismissing it as just another piece of routine financial paperwork. I ignored it. But now everything looks suspicious, I thought, as I flipped through old photos in the gallery, my mind racing. A few days later, while I was at the bank depositing a small salary, I overheard a vague but haunting conversation between an employee and a customer. The withdrawals from Mr. Thompson's account are unusual. Victoria recently withdrew a large sum. Those words struck me like a thunderbolt. John Thompson. Victoria. Large withdrawals. The keywords seemed to fit together in my mind. I remembered that strange letter, and the times Victoria had hastily handed over papers for her father to sign without explanation. Everything now became a dark picture. Victoria was not only winning his heart, she was quietly controlling his finances with sophisticated tricks. Backed into a corner, I knew I couldn't stand still. That night, after the rest of the family had fallen asleep, I crept into my father's study. My heart was pounding in my chest, each beat a warning. I turned on the flashlight on my phone, searched carefully among the drawers, so quietly that the rustle of paper made me catch my breath. And then I found it. Bank statements, piles of bills. My eyes scanned the numbers, the columns of notes, then stopped. There were large withdrawals with vague notes. Investment expenses, internal support. From unknown accounts, or from companies with unknown names. Most of the transactions had occurred after Victoria had moved in with my father. Some of them bore my father's signature, but in a stiff, unfamiliar handwriting, unlike his usual style. The more I looked at them, the clearer it became. This was a carefully orchestrated scheme. What is she doing? I muttered, my hands shaking as I copied each page, making sure I didn't miss a single detail. I needed proof. As I continued searching, I found a locked drawer. After a few minutes of searching, I finally opened it. Inside was an old file, along with several photos of my mother standing next to a strange man. He was about my father's age, with a gentle face and eyes very similar to my mother's. On the back of the photo was a handwritten note, Henry Jameson. The name was completely unfamiliar to me. My mother had never mentioned a relative by that name. Why did my father keep these photos a secret? And what did this man mean to my mother? To the whole family? I tried to stay calm, taking pictures. A chill ran through me as I realized Victoria's level of manipulation was far beyond what I had imagined. She was not just an opportunist, she seemed to be a cunning fox, with a plan, a purpose, a history. I stood there, clutching my phone, fighting between my emotions and my reason. Should I expose everything? But my father? He trusted her blindly. Would I be able to change his mind? I was scared. Really scared, but that fear was being overtaken by anger. Anger at the betrayal, at the erasure of my mother's memory, and at the exploitation of the father I loved without my knowledge. The tension in the family was at its peak. I knew this was not the time to stay silent. I had to act, not just to protect myself, but to protect my father and my mother's honor. Even if I had to face Victoria alone, I could not turn back. The evidence I had, even though it was just a few snapshots taken on my phone, weighed heavily on my chest. I knew it was time to stop being silent, not only to protect my father, but also to demand justice for my mother, the person Victoria had tried to erase from the memory of this house with her coldness and hypocrisy. That night, the rain poured down like a warning from the sky. The living room was bathed in pale yellow light, the air thick and oppressive. Victoria sat cross-legged on the sofa that my mother had once loved, her haughty posture a mockery. My father was in his study, and I was grateful that he could not hear the confrontation immediately. "Victoria, I know everything. Here's the proof," I said, my voice hoarse, but with the steely determination I didn't know I had. I held up the phone, the screen showing photos of shady transactions, zooming in on every number, every forced and distorted signature. She looked down, her eyes twitching for a moment, a reflex she couldn't hide. But a few seconds later, a frosty smile appeared on her lips. "Proof? Emily, you seem to be mentally unstable. You should see a doctor." Her voice was sarcastically gentle, as if I were a child babbling nonsense. Before I could pull away, Victoria snatched the phone from my hand. Her fingers flew across the screen like a predator. "Stop! No!" I screamed, my heart pounding in my chest. But it was too late. Every photo, every note, every single one was erased in an instant. She threw the phone back at me like it was trash, and her expression changed with terrifying speed. Her face was pale, her voice soft and trembling as if she were in a state of pure panic. "Oh my God. Emily, what are you going to do to me? Are you going to attack me?" Then she raised her hand and scratched her arm, creating a small scratch that was enough to draw blood. At that moment, my father walked in. He had just left his office, a frown still on his face. When he saw the scene before him, Victoria clutching her bleeding arm, me standing there, shaking my phone in my hand, his eyes darkened. "What's going on? Emily, what are you doing?" Victoria immediately threw herself into his arms like a master actress, tears streaming down her face. John, she attacked me. She said I was a liar. She was going to hit me." Her voice was choked, trembling with drama. My father's eyes turned to me, filled with not only anger but also deep disappointment. "Emily, what did you do to Victoria? How could you slander her and even commit violence against her?" "No, it's not like that. Dad, she was acting. She erased all the evidence, but I saw—" I tried to explain, the words stuck in my throat, as if I was struggling in the middle of a nightmare with no way out. "What evidence? Lies? You beat someone up and then you make up lies? Emily, what's wrong with you?" Dad's voice was like thunder, echoing in the already heavy room. Then he pointed straight at the door, his eyes filled with coldness. "Get lost. Get out of my house right now. From today on, I will no longer have a daughter like you." I stood there, stunned. The world seemed to shatter into invisible fragments, piercing my heart. The rain continued to pour down, mixing with my tears, salty tears of resentment and pain. My father, the man I once respected and loved, was now pushing me out of his life as if I were a stranger. I turned to look at Victoria. She was smiling, a triumphant, cruel, satisfied smile. I had no home, no father, no place to go. Everything I believed in had collapsed like a sandcastle washed away by a tidal wave. But in that moment of despair, a ray of light suddenly appeared, weak but strong. "I will not fall. I will not let Victoria destroy everything. I will expose the truth. Even if I am alone, I will stand up. I know there are still people who believe in me, friends I can rely on." I turned my back, walked out into the rain. Each step was heavy like an oath. The rain mixed with tears, washing away the hurt but could not erase my will. My footsteps echoed in the night. Not a run, but the first declaration of war. That stormy night with its rumbling thunder and howling winds has become an indelible mark in my memory. It was not only the moment when I was abandoned by my own father, but also the beginning of a completely different journey. A journey without a home, without a support. I stood frozen at the threshold of the house that I once called home, watching my suitcase, book box, and familiar paintbrush being thrown carelessly onto the rain-soaked lawn. My beloved paintbrush rolled into a puddle of black water, a symbol of the desolation of the remaining life that was slowly slipping away in despair. "Here's all your stuff. Get out and don't ever come back." My father's voice was filled with anger, like a thunderclap to my heart, mixed with the thunder that tore through the night. Mr. John stood on the porch, his face red, his eyes flashing with uncontrolled fury. Beside him, Victoria folded her arms coldly, a thin smile on her lips that made me shiver. A smile of victory, full of contempt. "Dad, how could you treat me like this?" I whispered, my voice mixed with rain and tears salty on my lips. "From this moment on, you are no longer my daughter. I have no child who dares to slander the woman I love." My father's last words were like a sharp knife, stabbing into my heart without hesitation. I trembled repeatedly, not only because of the cold, but because of the deep pain that was tearing my heart apart. All my faith, all my hope in love, in family, had crumbled into ashes. I struggled, tried to hold on with everything left in my heart, but he blindly gave his heart and mind to Victoria. The sense of loss, betrayal, anger, and despair surged through me like a tsunami. For a moment, I thought I would drown, unable to breathe. But then, in the sodden darkness, a fragile light suddenly flashed from deep within me. A strange, slow, yet powerful force. "No, I will not fall," I told myself, my hands clenching into fists. "Victoria cannot win. I will turn the truth around. Even if there is no one else by my side, I will stand up and fight." I looked up, staring straight into my father's once loving eyes, now cold and resentful. But there was no longer pleading or despair in my gaze. Instead, there was a small spark of determination. Though my voice was still trembling with cold and heartache, each word came out clear and steady. "You can abandon me, but you cannot deny the truth. One day, you will regret it." It was not a threat, but an oath, quiet but resonant like the tolling of a bell in a storm. I turned away, not looking back. I did not allow myself to look again at the house that had betrayed me, did not allow myself to cling to what was dead. I walked in the rain, each cold drop mingling with the falling tears. Each step was a farewell, a cut to the past that had no way back. The sound of my footsteps echoed through the rain like a silent declaration of war. Each step was a decision, a necessary separation, even if it was painful. I didn't know where I was going, I just knew I couldn't stay. I couldn't continue breathing in a house full of lies, where truth was twisted and love was manipulated. I needed a place to stay, a space to think, to heal, to breathe. And in that moment, the name Sarah appeared clearly in my mind. Sarah, my best friend from college, a warm soul who lived in a small apartment not far from here. I believed that she wouldn't turn her back on me. Each heavy but sure step took me further away from my old home, further away from the painful memories. I did not run away. I chose to leave, to protect myself even though my heart was bleeding. My life had taken an unexpected turn, a path that no one had planned. The rain was still pouring, but a strange feeling gradually rose in my heart. A relief, as if the chains had been removed. Peace did not come from accepting to bow down, but from deciding to break free. I had lost everything: family, love, trust, but I still had myself. And that was enough to start over. The rain outside had stopped, but inside me, the storm was still raging. I took refuge in Sarah's small apartment, my college sweetheart. She didn't say much, just held me tight, as if silence was the only language my broken heart needed. I huddled on the old sofa, still cold, both physically and mentally. Sarah handed me a cup of hot tea, and the warmth crept up from her palms to the darkest part of my chest, a rare comfort in the long, lonely night. When things calmed down a bit, Sarah seemed to remember something. She rummaged through my sodden belongings and handed me a crumpled envelope. "I found this in your stuff. It looks important," she said softly. I recognized it immediately as the letter from the Miami law office, the one I'd accidentally left on my father's desk. In the panic of the night before, I'd completely forgotten about it. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. The first line left me speechless. "We hereby announce the legacy of Mr. Henry Jameson." Henry Jameson? The name was both strange and strangely familiar, but I couldn't place it. I read the letter over and over again, trying to make sense of the words that were turning my world upside down. Legacy? From whom? And why me? The next morning, with Sarah's encouragement, I decided to call the Miami law firm. Part of me suspected this was a scam or some terrible mistake. But when the lawyer politely offered to pay for the entire trip, my curiosity overcame any reservations. I nodded, accepting the unknown destination. The flight to Miami was like a hazy dream. I sat by the window, looking out at the sea of white clouds drifting lazily below, like the distant dreams I had buried. Just last night, I was homeless and directionless. Now, I was flying to a strange place where the future was completely unclear. From homeless overnight, I am flying to Miami, to a chapter of my life I never dared to imagine, I told myself, trying to hold on to the fragile thread of hope trembling in my heart. When the plane landed in Miami, the bright sunshine, warm air, and salty sea breeze immediately erased the cold, gloomy New York. A luxury car was waiting to take me to the lawyer's office. I sat across from attorney David Chen, a middle-aged man with sharp eyes and silver-streaked hair, exuding a trustworthy dignity. "Hello, Ms. Thompson. I am the lawyer for Mr. Henry Jameson, your mother's younger brother, your uncle." I was stunned. My uncle? But my mother never mentioned him. I searched my memory, but could not find any clue about a man named Henry Jameson. Even my father had never mentioned him. Attorney Chen smiled slightly, his gaze seeming to understand what I was feeling. "Mr. Jameson is a private person, a renowned art collector who has always stayed away from the limelight. However, he loved your mother very much and often watched you from afar. He knew about your passion for art, about the challenges you had to overcome. Every word he said was like a drop of sweet water falling into my heart. A place that had been dried up by being forgotten and rejected. A relative, even a stranger, had watched over me, understood me, and appreciated what I had never been acknowledged by my father." Attorney Chen placed a thick file on the table. "Miss Emily, you are the sole heir of Mr. Henry Jameson. The total assets are estimated at about $30 million, including a beach house in Miami and a priceless art collection." $30 million. The number echoed in my head, drowning out all other thoughts. I sat there, unable to form words. From a penniless, homeless man on the streets, I had suddenly become the heir to a fortune. Everything before my eyes seemed to distort. The number, the words, even myself in that moment. I can't believe it. From being homeless to inheriting a huge fortune, I said to myself, my heart filled with emotions I had never felt before. Finally, I'm being recognized by a relative who is a stranger but knows me better than anyone else. The recognition I had been longing for, waiting for so long, now came from the most unexpected place. But amid the surge of joy and relief, a strange emotion crept in. Doubt. Could I really start over? Could I be happy when the family wound was still bleeding? I still clearly remembered my father's angry eyes, Victoria's cold smile. This new journey, I knew, was not just about rebuilding my life. It was also about confronting the ghosts of the past, to find myself again. The door of the beach house in Miami slowly opened, revealing a world completely foreign to me. A world of light, freedom, and overwhelming beauty. Warm sunlight flooded every corner, carrying the gentle scent of salt and the sound of waves lapping from the horizon. The wind here smelled different. It smelled of life, of things that had never begun, in stark contrast to the cold and darkness of that rainy night in New York. The house appeared like a work of contemporary art, with glass walls opening up to a vast view of the ocean, where each room exuded a quiet elegance and sophistication. I stepped inside with the feeling of being lost in a strange and enchanting dream. Each room that opened was a new surprise. This was not just a place to live, but a sanctuary of art. Uncle Henry Jameson's collection was like a hidden treasure trove. Classical oil paintings in warm colors, bronze statues glinting in the sunlight filtering through the curtains, ceramic vases exquisite in every detail. For me, someone who had spent my youth pursuing a career in art history, it felt like standing in the heart of something I loved. Every object here is like a slice of memory, telling a silent story about an uncle I have never met but feel strangely close to, I thought, gently reaching out to touch the painting of a beach at sunset. As I wandered around, a small office with a half-open door lured me in. A thick file sat on the desk, and as I flipped it open, a sense of shock washed over me. Inside was my entire life. Childhood photos, school transcripts, newspaper articles about small exhibitions I'd participated in New York, all carefully filed away. "Has he been watching me?" I whispered, my eyes landing on a photo of me with my mother and David as a child. A choking sensation rose up. The man I'd never met was the one who had silently watched, protected, and loved me from afar for so many years. The first few days here were a mixture of emotions: overwhelmed, skeptical, bewildered. But then that feeling of strangeness gradually gave way to intimacy and peace. I stumbled upon a special room with easels, paints, brushes, and unfinished paintings. A complete art studio, as if created just for me. Perhaps Uncle Henry knew, had everything ready, waiting for the day I arrived. He left this place for me, as a message. Keep painting, live for what you love, I thought, my hand trembling slightly as I picked up the brush. From then on, I spent hours every day immersed in colors and lines. Between his paintings and my own, I felt we were connected, beyond death and time. Although the darkness of the past still occasionally crept into my dreams, I knew I couldn't live in sad memories forever. I began to step out, exploring the seaside city with new eyes. At a small art exhibition in the city center, I met Chloe, a young artist full of energy, with curly reddish-brown hair and eyes like the summer sun. She painted colorful abstract paintings and carried a captivating free spirit. "I'm Chloe. Nice to meet you." She smiled brightly, extending her hand. "I've heard about the Henry Jameson collection. He's a giant in the art world here." "You're Emily Thompson, right? The heiress?" "Yes, it's nice to meet you, Chloe," I replied, relieved to be able to talk to someone with the same passion. "Do you have any work yet? I'd love to see it," Chloe asked, her eyes lighting up like a child seeing something magical. "I'm just starting over. It's still unfinished," I replied, for the first time feeling comfortable sharing some of my story. We became fast friends. Chloe introduced me to other artists, took me to exhibitions, small auctions, seaside cafes where the art world congregated. She was like a breath of fresh air in my life, helping me find laughter again, helping me feel like I could belong. Even though old obsessions still returned, I was no longer alone. I had friends, a community, art, and a part of me began to feel at peace again. A new life was taking shape every day, but deep down, I knew one day I had to go back and face what I had left behind, because only then would I be truly free. As time passed, like the silent waves erasing footprints in the sand, the wounds in my heart gradually healed. Miami, the city of sunshine and color, began to become a part of me. With the huge fortune that Uncle Henry left behind, I understood that I could not just live a meaningless life of luxury. I wanted to turn that legacy into something bigger, more meaningful, as a way to pay tribute to my uncle, and at the same time fulfill a secret dream that I have always cherished: supporting young artists who are struggling between talent and adversity. With the dedicated support of attorney David Chen and the tireless enthusiasm of Chloe, I set out to build the foundation for the Jameson Thompson Foundation. At a grand press conference held at a prestigious art gallery in the heart of Miami, I stood before dozens of cameras pointed at me, full of determination. Flashes continuously flashed like lightning in the daytime. I took a deep breath, then began to speak. I believe that art can touch and change people's souls. It is not simply entertainment, but also the deepest voice of the human soul, a bridge between cultures. The Jameson Thompson Foundation will be a place for young talent who have never had a chance to bring their stories to light and for the world to hear. News of Emily Thompson, the young woman who inherited $30 million and founded an art charity, quickly spread across newspapers, television shows, and social media. I suddenly became a name mentioned in conversations about art and charity. The compliments, the admiring glances, the warm handshakes, samain, sa, all made me more confident in the path I had chosen. But with the glory comes the shadow of the past. I knew that sooner or later my ex-family would find out through the news. And it did. Sooner than I thought. One quiet night, as I was drafting a grant proposal for a local art school, the phone rang. An unfamiliar number from New York appeared. I hesitated, then pressed the answer button. It's me. Emily, it's me. The trembling voice on the other end of the line seemed to come from another life. I saw you in the newspaper. Are you okay? I was stunned. All the bitter memories came rushing back like a tidal wave. That rainy night, the cruel words, the cold betrayal. What do you want? I asked, my voice so cold that it surprised even me. Father, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I wanted to see you. I didn't answer. My heart was clenched. The past could not be forgiven. I hung up. That call was like a ghost returning from oblivion, reminding me that I could not completely escape the old wounds. A few days later, it was David's turn to call. His voice was full of anguish and pleading. Sister, I'm really sorry. It was wrong of me to doubt you. I want to make it up to you. Can I come visit you? I didn't say no, but I wasn't ready to forgive either. I told David that I needed time, and that I would call back when I felt calm enough. I knew it wasn't over. I was approaching an inevitable confrontation. So I installed security cameras throughout the villa, and every important conversation was carefully recorded. I didn't want Victoria, the person who had once brought my life to a standstill, to repeat any of her schemes. And then, as if the script had been written, one morning the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, my heart sank. There stood John, my father, looking haggard, his eyes weary, and Victoria as if time had not touched her perfect appearance. Her eyes swept around the luxurious space behind me, calculating and greedy, hidden behind a bright smile. Hi, Emily. I hear you've been doing great, Victoria said sweetly. Let's come and see you. Maybe we can talk about your foundation. I looked straight at her, the look of someone who had weathered the storm. I was no longer the girl who had been backed into a corner. I was the Emily Thompson of today, strong, calm, and clear-headed. I had been waiting for this moment. I knew that someone like Victoria would never give up on a juicy bait. But this time, I had what she could not erase. Evidence and no fear. The family war had begun again. But this time, I was the one who had the initiative. I had the right to set boundaries. I had the right to defend myself. And I would not let anyone, not even my own blood, hurt me again. As the door of the villa closed behind my father and Victoria, a thick fog quietly filled the living room. David, who had flown to Miami at my invitation the day before, stood silently in the corner of the room, his eyes following my every move with obvious tension. Victoria sat down on the sofa opposite me, the faint smile on her lips still arrogant, while my father sat down slowly, his face tired and his eyes constantly scanning the villa as if searching for something familiar from an unfamiliar life. Then, as if nothing had happened, Victoria launched into her usual speech. Emily, I see great potential in your fund. With my extensive financial experience, I can help you expand it and take it to an international level. Her voice was as sweet as honey, as smooth as silk, but underneath was a plot that I had experienced too many times. I didn't answer right away. I just looked straight into her eyes, a thin smile on my lips. Really, Victoria? Do you really want to help me grow the fund? Or are you just trying to drain the trust and assets of others again? Victoria paused for a moment. Confusion flashed in her sharp eyes, but she regained her composure in a flash. What are you talking about, Emily? I'm just concerned about you. I stood up and walked towards the large screen that had been set up in front of me. My voice was firm, each word echoing off the silent walls. Dad? David, you two need to see this. Victoria flinched. Her eyes darted and she suddenly jumped up and rushed toward the screen, but David blocked her way. He glanced at me, his eyes both worried and trusting. I pressed the button. The screen lit up. The images were undeniable. Victoria sneaking into her father's office, copying documents, and making a series of secret transactions to withdraw money from the account. Then came the haunting audio, her voice whispering in my father's ear, each word slandering me, each sentence twisting the truth to put the blame on me, as she had done so many times in the past. My father was stunned. His face was white, his eyes fixed on the screen as if he blinked, the truth would vanish. David stood frozen, his lips pressed together, his jaw clenched with anger. And then, the final scene, the video I never wanted to see again, played. The living room that rainy night, where I was falsely accused. Victoria snatched the phone from my hands, erased all the evidence, then, self-harmed, threw herself into my father's arms and cried. Everything, every movement, every expression, every blatant lie, was recorded in haunting silence. Victoria stepped back, trembling. Her face went from pale to ashen, her eyes fixed on the screen. My father sank into a chair, his hands shaking as he held his head. His voice cracked as if his soul had been torn from him. No, it can't be. I believed it. No, it's all fake. I made it all up. Victoria screamed like a cornered animal. She tried to run, but David held her tight. His eyes were as if he had just seen a complete stranger, a woman he had once thought trustworthy. I stepped forward, my voice firm, without a trace of trembling or pity. You chose to believe her instead of your own daughter. She took your things, took your money, and then staged a whole drama to chase me out of the house. Victoria struggled, but there was no escape. My security team, who had been notified in advance, appeared and quickly restrained her without giving her a chance to protest. I turned to my father, my heart no longer filled with hatred, only a cold sadness. I can't forgive right now, but I want you to know, I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing it for the truth. Mom deserves to be vindicated, and you deserve to know how you were lied to. My father looked up, his eyes watery, old and broken. In that moment, he was no longer the man who had rejected me, but a man facing the fallout of his own choices. A storm of emotions erupted inside me. Not rage, but relief. The truth was out. Victoria was taken from the mansion that same day, and within hours she was arrested by the police on charges of fraud and embezzlement. The investigation was swift. With the evidence beyond doubt, she had nowhere to go. And so, my family, broken as it was, finally had a chance to heal, although the journey would be long and not easy. But at least justice had spoken. And I knew somewhere my mother was smiling too. Victoria's scandal and her sentence quickly dominated the headlines for a long time. While I was not happy about her downfall, I felt a deep sense of relief, as if a burden that had been smoldering for years had finally been lifted. The truth had come to light, and my reputation, which had been mercilessly trampled, had now been restored. It was a necessary closure, a door closing to open a new path for me to walk. The process of healing with my father and brother David was a long and arduous climb. My father was forced to face a bitter truth. He had been blatantly deceived by the woman he had considered his soulmate, and because of that blind trust, he had turned his back on his own daughter. In every conversation, I could see the torment on his face. The lines seemed to deepen with regret. At first, our conversations were filled with heavy silences, averted glances, and even tears flowing back into our eyes. But then we attended family therapy sessions, where old wounds were uncovered and acknowledged with all honesty. I remember vividly our first meeting at a small coffee shop on a Miami street corner, just a few months after the dust settled. My father looked noticeably older, his gray hair no longer as neatly combed, and his eyes now tinged with remorse. no longer had the cold, distant look they once had. "I know I have caused you much pain, Emily," he said, his voice hoarse. "I am sorry. I believed the lies too much and doubted my own daughter." I took his hand, which had once been hard but was now cold and trembling. "I have learned to forgive too, Father. The wounds are still there, but I know you have endured a lot. Healing takes time, and I am willing to wait." David also gradually appeared more and more in my life. He was not good at flowery words, but his small actions, the unexpected phone calls, the times he helped me run the Jameson Thompson Foundation, were evidence of his sincere repentance and desire to start over. He quietly helped me rebuild my legal foundation, strengthen my finances, and expand the foundation internationally. "I'm so proud of you, Emily," David said one afternoon as we walked along the beach. "You turned pain into something extraordinary. I'm sorry I wasn't there for you when you needed me most." I smiled, leaning my head against his shoulder. "We're still family, David, and that's never changed." My Jameson Thompson Foundation has grown beyond my wildest dreams. It is more than just an arts support organization. It has become a home for young talent, a creative space where artists can find their voice and their aspirations. Exhibitions, workshops, and scholarship awards are held regularly. Each event is a testament to the vitality that art can bring. Standing in front of young audiences, looking into their fiery eyes, I often say, keep your passion alive, even if the world turns its back on you. Faith and effort are the wings that make your dreams fly far. Life in Miami was now a peaceful song, filled with sunshine and sea breezes. I continued to paint, continued to explore Uncle Henry's unfinished works, and above all, I learned to enjoy every moment, without regret, without resentment. And then love came, gently like a gentle melody. Mark, a talented architect, appeared in my life as a blessing from heaven after all the years of hurt. He loved not only me, but also the cracks, the scars that I had tried to hide. One glorious sunset, as the sun was about to disappear behind the horizon, we walked along the beach hand in hand. The sound of the waves lapping was like a blessing. "You have created something wonderful, Emily," Mark said, squeezing my hand. "From the ashes, you have created something wonderful." I leaned my head on his shoulder and whispered, "You too, Mark. You're the peace I've been longing for." Looking out to sea, where the horizon meets the water, I feel a quiet faith rising in my heart. My life was once battered by storms, but in the end, I walked through the darkness into the light. From a family tragedy, I found an unexpected blessing. I understood that even in the greatest loss, people can still find the strength to be reborn, to forgive and to live a full life. The value of a person does not come from the acceptance of others, but from the courage to stand up after falling, from love for oneself, and from compassion for those around you.